Great. Hello, everyone. We are live for the third edition of the Decentralized Mic. Hello, guys. We have great speakers here. Bruno, Aaron, Alberto, how are you guys doing?
Hi, Zoe. Good.
Hello.
Doing well.
Great. And hello to everyone joining us from the live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter. You can interact with us here as well. We are very happy to see you. My name is Zoe. I'm host of and moderator of the session. I'm a Polkadot Head Ambassador and very happy to introduce or lead the third edition of the Decentralized Mic today. The Decentralized Mic has started as an event series where we cover a lot of exciting topics for the overall Web3 world, but also specifically to Polkadot. We have started with Web3 marketing, we had business development and investor relation conversations, and today we are going to talk about developer relations and onboarding. Also DevRel and how we can actually bring more developers into the Polkadot ecosystem. However, we also want to keep the conversation more generic so everyone outside of Polkadot can actually learn how we do things in Polkadot or how it can be applied to the overall Web3 world. And that said, the speakers that we have here today are, of course, dedicated to the Polkadot ecosystem. All of them are representing different teams that have received funding from the Decentralized Futures program that was issued end of last year, connected to the goal of decentralizing Polkadot even more. So we have different teams that are working all for DevRel, but in different areas, actually funded to make Polkadot more decentralized. And today we're going to hear how these teams are approaching this and how we are overall approaching DevRel and onboarding for Polkadot, and how maybe also decentralization can be a challenge or an opportunity to work for DevRel. So I'm very excited to get the conversation started. And I would like to give over to the speakers here. We have amazing speakers that have worked on DevRel for years within Polkadot or maybe outside Polkadot. As I said, Alberto here, who is working for Papermoon, empowering developer relations, also known in the ecosystem for a long time because you've also worked on launching the Moonbeam parachain. So now building your own project, and we will hear from you much more in a second. We have Aaron here from Accelerate Polkadot. They are actually also mastering blockchain development, a bit of a different approach than Papermoon, and we will hear about this later on. And Aaron, you also know DevRel in Polkadot very well because you have worked for Parity before. So nice to see you here. And then we have Bruno from the POP or Play on Polkadot team. That's actually a Polkadot development platform. So thank you everyone for being here. And maybe if you guys want to start to introduce shortly in 2 minutes, what kind of problem you're actually solving with your platform or your service in developer relations. Alberto, I will start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe, for that great introduction. So I mean, at Papermoon, like Zoe said, we've been working a long time being developer relations provider for Moonbeam, which you may know as part of the Polkadot ecosystem. We also started working with another Polkadot project called Tansy, right? And so I've been in Polkadot ecosystem for over 4 years now. And when the Decentralized Future initiative launched, I was sort of like trying to think about how Papermoon can sort of bring that experience that we've had in Polkadot for years now and sort of put together our grain of salt, let's say. And so basically, one of the things that we started doing is thinking about how we can create content around things that we created content for Moonbeam itself, but were actually tools that were used across the Polkadot ecosystem, right? I mean, one of these tools being, for example, that's well known called Chopsticks. And so we sort of started thinking about, okay, what if we sort of create a vertical that is about content creation for these tools that are treasury funded, Web3 Foundation grant recipients, but they don't have within the scope of the grant sort of documentation. And so that started as the initial idea, but that developed into something a lot bigger. We actually presented about this in the Polkadot Coded Asia edition that just happened. And that evolved into a new idea, which is basically having a Polkadot developer documentation hub, right? Because when we started creating content, we realized that Polkadot documentation is super fragmented. There's no one true source of going out there and getting what you need to start building. You have the substrate docs, which are not relevant anymore. The Polkadot wiki, which it just has a lot of content because it targets end users, developers. And so we started sort of streamlining everything into a single kind of Polkadot Documentation Developer Hub. And we're working really closely with the Web3 Foundation technical educators on, making this a reality, basically. So yeah, I would say that's the main scope of our Decentralized Futures grant. We also have another vertical specific to Asia, but I'll leave that out of this conversation because I think the big idea that we bring to the table is the Polkadot Developer Documentation Hub.
Amazing. A very important thing or problem to solve if this was not there before. Thank you for sharing. Aaron, over to you. What problem are you solving for the Polkadot ecosystem?
Yeah, so we're much narrower focused than Alberto would be. So folks who may not be super familiar with developer relations or what developer relations is, for me, it's a collection of lots of different kind of activities and jobs, everything from kind of advocacy, developer experience, developer tooling, but also in developer education. And that's really where we're focused, is on that particular vertical, that part of developer relations. So we're really only looking at how we can create very high quality guides for developers. So Alberto mentioned there things like the Polkadot Wiki and how it has a range of different types of content on it, everything from what I would call like end user documentation. How do I stake? How do I use Asset Hub? How do I, that's kind of like your end user documentation. Whereas we are very much just going to be, no, this is for developers. This is for people who have maybe got a little bit of knowledge about the ecosystem, or at least familiar with Web3, or at least have a really good grounding in Rust, etc. But now I want to take that to the next stage. So like, okay, I'm sold in this idea. I understand the main concepts behind Web3 and blockchain. How do I actually go and build something? And that's kind of where we are very laser focused on that particular niche.
Amazing. Okay, also very important. We already heard the content more, right, than the Builder Hub. And Bruno, How does POP fits into this, and what problem are you solving?
So first, thank you, Zoe, for putting this together. And I want to say also, it's really, really happy to be here with two really strong pillars of developer relations, Alberto and Aaron. Alberto, the Paper Moon docs are amazing. I personally read them and I think they're like butter. You just read them, it makes sense. It's easy to read. The UI, the UX is good. And Aaron, you have a wealth of knowledge in DevRel. You came from Web 2 and we've talked extensively about DevRel before PBA. So looking forward to all your work. So with POP, the way we came to scene is that we saw that DevX is the biggest barrier in Polkadot. So with POP CLI, the tool that we're building with the DF funding, we aim to solve that, right? So POP CLI has two tracks. One is the smart contract path. The other one is the app chain path. And you can use POP CLI to build Polkadot parachains, app chains. You can use POP CLI to develop smart contracts for Polkadot. And we want to make that really easy.
Wow. Okay, that's a great short intro. Thank you so much. This shows already that you can summarize complex things much more efficient, which is very important for DevRel, right? So that's why you focus on the UI, UX, or developer experience. Before we start into like how you guys strategize this and so on, maybe to understand a bit more of the overall Polkadot ecosystem, why was only, let's say, the decentralization process a part that you started this, or was there maybe different motivation? You just saw the opportunity to improve it? Maybe you can share a little bit what really triggered to do what you're building now, and how it also overall fits. If you want to combine this, overall fits in the DevRel process. Aaron, you touched on this already, right? What is DevRel already? Actually, I don't think we need to dive too much into this developer relations. But we also might have some audience here from like the Web 2 side, and developer relations is a very important component in Web 3, right? Because we work in a very technology focused industry. So if you want to explain again, what was the main trigger of what you're building, and where does it fit in the overall developer relations process in working with the other teams? This makes sense. And Aaron, if you want to take this question.
Sure, yeah. So for us, the reason that we put in for Decentralized Futures and the reason we chose this as our project is really to scratch our own itch, to be honest. Bruno mentioned that we've been at PBA, so the Polkadot Blockchain Academy. For those who are not aware, it's kind of like a 5-week, very intense kind of course on kind of getting started building with Polkadot, Web3, substrate frame, everything. And really, while I was doing that, I couldn't find any documentation that similar to what we're producing. You know, there is the reference documentation, there's the Rust docs, and they're great. You know, they are a really, really good reference. They're very comprehensive reference, but it's like a dictionary. Okay, it's like, yeah, a dictionary is a fantastic wealth of knowledge about words, but you're not going to pick up a dictionary if you want to read a story. You know, yes, every story ever written is contained somewhere in that dictionary if you know how to arrange the words in the correct order, but it doesn't tell the story. You know, so, and that's kind of what we're looking at with the API documentation that we currently have. The Rust docs is like, there's a lot of information there, but there's nothing giving it structure. You know, you already have to have a kind of, you're coming at it with some existing knowledge of how things piece together, how substrate works with frame, how the contracts palette. What is a palette? You know, it's like all of these kind of things that, yes, it's great if you can take a 5-week course and sit in a classroom where the core engineers tell you all these things, but not everybody has the privilege of being able to do that. You know, so for those people, where can they go and go, okay, I know Rust, or I know, I want to work in the front end, I want to build a dApp, I know React, I know whatever. How do I apply the existing skills that I have to building in Web3? You know, and that's the developers that we're after, because that was us. You know, that's where we came from. We already had, I'd been a developer for 20 odd years, and I was just like, how do I take my existing knowledge and apply it to this new domain? You know, and that was the catalyst for us doing this, because we couldn't find that information for ourselves. And Bruno said, we spent a long time now kind of in the ecosystem. We've built up that knowledge, and it's been frustrating to get to that point, and I want to save that frustration from others.
Thank you for sharing. A lot of knowledge sharing is a trigger often, right? Or is also needed to make developer relations important. Bruno, do you want to hop on this question as well?
So the way that it happened to me is that, so I was working at Parity with a few other people, and Parity pointed at us and they're like, okay, you guys are getting decentralized. And we're like, okay, but you know, if you come up with an idea, we possibly will fund you. So then I got together with a team, all Parity ex-engineers, and we brainstormed an idea, and we're like, okay, what do we want to solve, right? And so that's where DevX came in. And also the other thing was, I was working in the consulting side of Parity, like ecosystem. We were externally facing people, developers who wanted to build on Polkadot. We would interface a lot with them. And one recurring pattern was that we saw that teams were successful, let's say in Ethereum, and they wanted to build like a similar solution on us. And they're like, how do we build that, right? We want to deploy a smart contract on Polkadot. And we really didn't have that solution. We would point them, well, you can use this, you can build a blockchain, a parachain. They're like, well, that's way too much. We just want to, deploy a simple smart contract. And we kept had to point people elsewhere. So then that's where the idea, we have the Pop CLI tool, and we're building Pop Network, which is an Ink smart contract parachain that uses DOT, right? So you can use DOT to deploy smart contracts. So it's not only DevX that we're doing, but it's also giving developers access to Polkadot tech through Ink.
Yes, through Ink. You want to expand on what Ink is?
Ink is an amazing smart contract language. It's like Rust with macros that make your life as a developer easier for building smart contracts. Ink was also developed by Parity. So as most of you know, Dr. Gavin Wood was the CTO of Ethereum. He created Solidity, and then he had bigger ideas and he created Polkadot. And part of Parity was they developed the Inc. smart contract programming language. I like to say it's a decentralized smart contract programming language. Like there's currently a proposal right now. You guys can look at the Polkadot Treasury proposal, where there's discussions on like how to move the Inc. programming language forward. And it was built, how do you say, like tight coupled with Polkadot, right? So when you're building with Inc., you're building with Polkadot. I can't say the same about other smart contract programming languages.
Okay, and I think to make this also clear to developers, we need a better experience, right? So that's why you're focusing on the UX as well, on POP. Alberto, maybe if you still want to comment on like the high level, like where maybe Papermoon fits in.
Yeah. So our experience is from the Moonbeam side, right? And Moonbeam is a very developer-friendly platform because at the end of the day, Moonbeam targeted Ethereum developers, and Ethereum is a very rich ecosystem that has a bunch of tooling and things for developers to use, right? And so when we compare that, to Polkadot, we were kind of like shocked to see that, the onboarding experience for Polkadot developers was truly painful, right? I mean, in the sense that there was very little content on like, how do I start to develop on Polkadot? I mean, you everything targeted developers to build your own really complex app chain, parachain, rollup, however you want to call it, from scratch with like custom palettes and things like that. There was no really like a real way to say, okay, how do you onboard to a testnet? How do you sort of use this tooling that already exists, right? And so, like I said before, we actually created a lot of documentation on Moonbeam around XEM, around Chopsticks, and around all these things that we're missing from a Polkadot perspective. And so we were like, okay, I mean, if we did that for Moonbeam, we can actually do that for the Polkadot ecosystem. And so we started creating this content as sort of like a first milestones of our Decentralized Futures program. And as we started sort of like putting everything together, we were like, I mean, there's a much bigger problem here, right? Because we can have this content hosted somewhere, but at the end of the day, people need to find it. Like, Polkadot doesn't have a docs@polkadot.com, right? That's like a pretty standard thing across all blockchain protocols. And so we have this idea of like, okay, let's try to be like an aggregator of like all these different contents that exist everywhere. And so that's where the idea came in, like to be the coordinator, like the agents that coordinate the effort to do this developer hub, right? So that's why like we're not actually doing it ourselves. We're contributing to it, but we're also sort of like, being the coordinators with the Web3 Foundation technical educators and so on. And so initially it was a much smaller scope of work, but that expanded as we saw demand or like the need for this in the Polkadot ecosystem. So our proposal is very focused on this developer documentation hub and some of the content around it. But, like developer relations is very broad. Like, so we're not doing developer support. We're supporting a little bit hackathons here and there, but it's not the main, like, thing that we're putting on the table.
Okay, and now the question is, it like actually comes up, like, is it who is like the target audience, right? Is it for different levels? A developer onboarding or like docs have also like different levels of getting started, like write your first in contract and so on. So what are the levels that you target? And even like from a developer experience or like their experience, because everything is written in Rust, right? So are we also targeting towards non-Rust developers, or can we implement them into Rust? So how do you, the question is, who is the target audience and how do we actually also acquire new developers? Bruno, if you want to comment on this.
Yeah, sure. So a great example, like I'll give you a concrete example, right? Like just today, I'm looking at the Pop Telegram and there's a developer saying, hey, I want to write a smart contract on Pop Network that will transfer assets from Alice on Asset Hub, and it'll transfer it to the smart contract address. How do I do this, right? So that's the type of developer that we're catering to. Developers that already have some understanding of Polkadot, like how Polkadot works, and are not afraid to get like their feet wet. I'd say that's the initial audience, right? Let's kind of sell it to people who are used to Polkadot already, and get a lot of feedback, improve the product. And then once we got that down, expand a little bit more. Great.
This is very fun, I guess, to work with these kind of developers that really want to try and maybe break things. Aaron, how about you? Your target audience?
So for us, yeah, we're probably intermediate developers. What we saw there's a lot of out there is when you look at kind of like guides and tutorials for Polkadot, or specifically for building an app chain or a parachain, there's lots of like, you know, how do I install the Substrate node template? You know, there's so many Dev2 articles and Medium articles and everything. It's just the exact same thing. It's like, okay, well, here's how you install Rust, and here's how you like clone the template, and here's how you get the runtime or build the node, and here's how you run the node, and that's it. Just stops at that point. And it's like, okay, that is one that's you're barely scratching the surface, and two, that this entire thing is being replaced by 2 commands from pop. You know, you're going to run a pop build and a pop up, and you're done. Like that's no longer a tutorial. We don't need these massive long tutorials anymore, just to get like started. So we're now looking at people who have gone, okay, yeah, fine. I know how to spin up a node. How can I build something with it? You know, how can I create a custom palette? How can I integrate balances and currency? How can I make an XCM call? You know, how can I, all of these kind of things that are actually the unique selling points of Polkadot and why you would build on a network in the first place. They're not really addressed anywhere. You know, I mentioned earlier, yes, you could go into the Rust docs and you could figure all this out for yourself. Or as we were told many, many times during PBA, just read the code. You know, but most developers don't have time to just read the code. You know, like they're going to check the docs. They're maybe going to like try and build a little POC or proof of concept or like minimum viable product or just something to try out the technology. And if they can't get something working in that first, like, you know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, they're going to bounce and they're going to go somewhere else. You know, and it's those developers is who we're targeting, the ones that, you know, they already have enough experience that they don't need to be handheld through the first little bit, and they just have a problem that they want to solve, and they want to, they're maybe even reviewing different technologies to go, okay, which one of these is useful for my use case? Which one of these is helping me going to solve my problem? Which one of these is going to improve my product, whatever? And it's that's the level that we're coming in at.
Very important. So already like pushing towards engagement, right? How do we keep them in the ecosystem? How do we keep them using our tech? And not because there's a big thing. So, I mean, onboarding can be very tough because if it's already too long of context or education, they won't even try it out, right? So make it short and nice so that we even start to try it out. Alberto, how do you fit into the structure and with the target audience?
No, I agree with a lot of what Aaron said. I think, you know, and I mentioned this before, like, right, like Polkadot, like initially was the documentation targeted really core developers, right? Not people that wanted to get started quickly. And also what like Bruno was doing with Paul, it kind of targets that same problem. I think, you know, we both three have been in the ecosystem for some time now, and we all three identified the same problems in different ways, right? And so the problem that we're targeting though is that, or tackling, is basically the telling a story, basically, right? Like, you know, we don't tell a story for Polkadot developers, right? I mean, initially we were only targeting people that were building app chains or parachains or, you know, or rollups, or whatever you want to call it. But, you know, what if you want to build a smart contract? Right? We don't have a story to tell them, basically, right? If you go to polkadot.com, in the smart contract section, it's very small. It doesn't go into details. There's no real, like, you know, the ink docs are there, but they don't really sort of tell you the whole story. And what if you want to build EVM smart contracts? I mean, that's also a developer that we should target as well, right? And so our idea is to sort of create this hub in which we'll tell stories to developers and take them to the piece of content they're trying to get to, right? And so, for example, like I said, imagine you're an EVM contract, smart contract developer, you know, and you go to docs@polkadot.com. In the future, this is still not there if you go there right now. You know, you'll find a path and like a toolkit for you, and to sort of like, you know, start building on Polkadot. That right now doesn't exist. You have to go directly to a smart contract platform like Moonbeam, Akala, Astar to start building there, right? And that really sort of splits the image of the ecosystem apart, right? And we're one ecosystem working together, and not just like ecosystems that are completely different and you know, distance from each other. So I think that's where we're trying to tackling. And like, you know, but I agree with what Aaron said, basically, of like, you know, like trying to basically ease the pain for developers that want to start building on the Polkadot ecosystem, basically. But yeah.
And a direct follow-up question to this, because Polkadot was from the ground up designed very innovative, and it changes a lot. And sometimes people say a lot of things are like experimental and so on. How do you keep the content, the journeys and so on up to date, or how do you communicate this maybe in a story to the developers with all the innovative updates that come very often in Polkadot? I would say maybe more often in like in traditional tech environments and so on. Is this a challenge? Do you see it as an opportunity? What are some of the experience that helps you to guide through this?
I mean, I don't necessarily think that this is unique to Polkadot, right? I mean, this is unique to Web3. Like Web3, people say that 1 year in Web3 is like 10 years in the regular work environment, right? And I'm a mechanical engineer. I work at Nissan for some time, so I understand that model, right? And so I think basically you create strategies around it without going into too much detail. At the end of the day, we're connected with the parity engineering team, so that we have heads up on what things are changing. We're connected also with other teams that we're working on documentation, like for example, the Rogue team, which is, I always forget what's the connection between Pop, Rogue, and Paseo Network. But, we're working with the Paseo testnet team because we'll be sort of having the Paseo testnet documentation on the developer hub, right? And so we have created all these connections already because, Papermoon and myself have been part of Polkadot for so long that, ideally we have this direct path of communication with all these teams that we're working on documenting their tool, their solution on the developer hub. And then we can create simple systems like, GitHub PRs or issues that people can report that this documentation is out of date. We have a GitHub bot that can basically follow the releases of this Polkadot SDK, Chopsticks, some Miniat, whatever, and then notify us that there was a new release, that, there was a big change. So, there are many, many ways we can stay up to speed. It's a challenge. I agree with you, Zoe. It's not easy. But it's just a matter of just, creating the right strategies to ensure that documentation is up to date. To me, like I said, I'm a mechanical engineer. And when I onboarded to Web3, I did a lot of tutorials. I did a lot of educational content out there. And the most frustrating thing was when I was following a tutorial and I was in step 17 out of 20 or 27 out of 30 and it failed. And you're like, oh my God, it's so frustrating, right? And so ideally, you want to avoid that, and I agree with you. It's a challenge, but we'll ensure that tutorials are up to date.
Bruno, Aaron, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, I can jump in on that as well. Actually, I think one of the things that Alberto touched on there that's really important. Actually, two things he touched on really important. One is having that communication between kind of the engineering and documentation. They've really improved that recently. And the fact that they're moving towards kind of having releases really helps things, being able to go, okay, this tutorial, we're going to pin it to this version of the Polkadot SDK. We're going to pin it to this version of Rust. We're going to pin it to all these other dependencies. And in that way, it also answers what Alberto was saying. Number one is if you can say to somebody, I have ran this in this tutorial on these versions of these libraries, these frameworks, this programming language, etc., it works. Then you don't run into that problem where you get to step 27 out of 30 and something's broken because one of the dependencies has been updated. It's very important to have everything pinned. That obviously has its own cons as well, in that it may not then be the latest version that you're working with, but you're at least not getting to that really heavy frustration element of something just being broken. It's like, okay, yes, this is not using the latest version of the Polkadot SDK. Maybe it's one version behind, two versions behind. That's acceptable. You don't want to be getting too many versions behind, but it's better to be like a version behind and it be working than to, be installing the newest versions and it be broken anyway. So I think having the really regular releases and having a nice kind of release structure and also a way to deprecate things works really well as well. So you're not just APIs are not just vanishing or being replaced or suddenly functioning differently. It's like, okay, if there's going to be a breaking change, then there's a deprecation strategy involved, etc. These are all things that come with time. I think we tend to forget as well, this is not just a new project, but a very new industry as well. We're still figuring things out and it's going to take a while to get these practices in, but they are coming. And there is lots of initiatives that are helping with that, like Alberto's, obviously with core engineering as well, now doing release cycles and stuff. people are aware that this is an issue and they are working on it. And I think it's just going to it's going to continue to keep getting better as well.
Yeah, so maybe add to that 100% what Alberto and Aaron have been saying, like in terms of like UX, like if you a lot of things in Polkadot takes at least a minimum of 10 steps to do, right? Like sometimes 30 steps. And it's like you're climbing up a mountain and then halfway through it breaks, right? And it's like, oh wow. And we don't want that kind of that type of UX. Like in terms of UX, sure, it could take 10 steps to do everything, but if the experience is that it felt like one step, then you've achieved good UX, right? So that's where like we come from, like with the pop tools, we want to make it really easy, like Aaron said in the beginning, where you can just run one command and it'll do those 10 steps for you, right? And then number two, in terms of engagement, I personally think that there has to be a reward mechanism, right? Like developers are working really hard, they're building something, and there should be some reward, some small reward mechanism. Previously, you had to build like a full parachain, and that was like some huge like endeavor. Now with like what we're building with the Pop Web3 platform, you can simply write a smart contract, deploy it, and get that quick reward mechanism. That feels good. The developer feels good. It gives them like a little milestone that they reached, and then they can continue developing.
This is great insights. Thank you. Yeah, keeping the engagement and the motivation going, very important. If we look how to engage, maybe not necessarily in front of the screen, but also at events, right? I would like to raise a question here from the audience directly, because we've seen DevRel is so much, right? Documentation and so on, but also giving workshops, maybe doing hackathons, building builder programs and so on. So really where you interact directly and the people that work and hack on your protocols. So hackathons is one of the areas. Polkadot has also sponsored several hackathons over the last month. But I've seen quite successful, and I think it's also always a good feedback loop, right? Joining in these hackathons. But here was a question from the audience, I think from Raul, that I will just read. With regards to hackathons, what do you think is missing in the pipeline for new devs participating in a hackathon to follow up and develop their ideas? And then there's another part of the question. What weakness have you seen in hackathons as the prime events where new devs get familiar with Polkadot and Substrate? I don't know if you guys, I think I bet you're out there a lot. Please take it and answer from your experience.
Yeah, you say that I'm out there a lot, but I see you in every event I go. So, we have similar experiences. Yeah, so, I mean, I think there's a crucial component to this question, to be honest, which is like, the pipeline, right? I mean, a hackathon, if it's only we put some prizes, we get developers excited, they get rewards and call it a day, it's a marketing strategy basically, right? In order for it to be successful, you need to make sure that the hackathon has a streamlined pipeline of we are wrapped up with the hackathon and we connect real good projects that the hackathon produced into a pipeline around BD grants, ecosystem grants, whatever you want to call it, right? And so currently, I think that system is a little bit broken in Polkadot, and basically because before there was a hackathon agent, I would say, like the typical are like in Code Club, Agent Hacks, ECA, all these like entities that get treasury funding to run a hackathon. But first of all, like their incentive is basically to run a hackathon, and that's it. I mean, they want it to be successful so they can come back and create another treasury proposal, right? But who's measuring success at the end of the day, right? And so they can say, yeah, we have 1,000 projects deployed something. Oh my God, that metric is great. But out of those 1,000 projects, who actually stay in the ecosystem, right? And nobody is actually measuring that. And so our proposal actually has a small hackathon component, in which what we're trying to do is basically provide, first of all, DevRel support for hackathons, only for hackathons, right? And that's something that I also sort of saw that was missing from my experience before. Like when I went to Polkadot hackathons, there was nobody providing DevRel support from a general Polkadot perspective, right? Someone that can, if a person has a problem building a palette, or like deploying to XYZ parachain. It doesn't have to be Moonbeam, right? It could be any parachain. This person with certain general level of knowledge from Polkadot can help the hacker say, hey, you should go this route. The error is here, the error is there, right? We actually had our first trial basically with Luca from our team. He went to the ECA Boston Hackathon, and the feedback that we got from the ECA team was like, without Luca, the hackathon would probably be like, way less successful, right? We're now working on the next step of our hackathon, say strategy, which is how do we plug in real, projects with the BD pipeline? And that is where it's a bit more difficult because the BD pipeline is a bit broken right now in Polkadot, right? We have the Decentralized Futures, projects that are, like Poke and Transistor, which are mainly targeting big projects, institutions, and things like that, right? But I don't really see like a grant recipient that it's like, targeting the little fish, right? And so, we're still sort of trying to see where this goes. We've been introduced to the Polkadot Alpha program, which is still run by Parity. The Web3 Foundation actually suggested that maybe we can bring those leads to them. And so we're now sort of creating a process to make sure that, we can actually make hackathons successful from a developer onboarding experience, which I think is what's been lacking in the past years. So yeah.
Very important, question. How does it work also with business development, right? Because DevRel fits into like the different processes there. But before we dive deeper there, Bruno, would you like to add to the hackathon question as well?
Yeah, so I have a very strong personal opinion on this. Like from my experience in Web3 and previously with Web2, we can't take the same mindset of like hackathons, what we did with Web2. We have to change it. It has to be different. Like from the experience that I've had with the hackathons, you can't build a Web3 solution in like a few days and give them, developers Red Bull. Here you go. Here's some Red Bull energy drinks. Build a Web3. It takes longer to build Web3 solutions, especially with, all the complexity. So we need to change the paradigm of Web3 hackathons. I think Web0 is doing a great job with that. The other thing is from the folks who actually attend a hackathon, I would like to see more high-level questions raised up. Like currently we have the Polkadot Stack Exchange, the Substrate Stack Exchange, but I want to see more beginner-friendly questions. And if they're not sure about something, raise the question up. It doesn't have to be in a private Discord channel. It could be in the Stack Exchange. It could be in the Pop Telegram. Like, how do I do this, right? Because then we get insight. Like all of us here in this video chat here, we're all catering for this audience, right? So it's really useful for us to know what's missing so that we can put a Band-Aid on that, right?
I want to jump in. I completely agree, Bruno. I mean, I've been very skeptical about hackathons for a long time now. In my time in Moonbeam, we saw a lot of what I called hackathon pirates. Like people that the participated in hackathons over and over, and they get so familiar with the tech stack that they're going to build projects that are way ahead of the competition, right? Because of what you said, like it's a weekend, right? How can you build a real project in a weekend? But if you have such a head start because you're like, the guts of the SDK, for example, in and out, you're going to have an advantage. But at the end of the day, that person is not really actually going to build something fruitful and long-term for the ecosystem. They just want their rewards and that's it. You know what I mean? Hey man, like 30K for a weekend, I'm in, you know what I mean? And so at the end of the day, I think a narrative around hackathons has to change. And also sort of like the way that we see hackathons bringing developers and bringing new projects into the ecosystem, and how do we make this a fruitful long-term relationship? But no, I hear what you say as well, and like I think what we actually notice in Moonbeam is that more than doing a hackathon, sometimes doing like an kind of like an accelerator was actually way better, because you do 8 weeks, even longer if you want, 12 weeks. But then you actually plug these teams as well with like BD support, marketing support across how they develop an actual team, right? Like an actual team that can build a solution that it's a bit more long-term. And like I've seen accelerators in Polkadot, but they've not achieved this level of success, the one that we had in Moonbeam. But maybe it's just to throw some ideas out there. But no, I've been very skeptical about hackathons. We're trying to sort of put in our grain of sand just to try to make them a little bit better. But I think we're so far off of what we would like to see from in the Web3 industry, for sure. So I actually call them a little bit more like a marketing thing, that like a developer onboarding strategy. So yeah.
Yeah, because even, I mean, the acceleration is a great example, but then you have like challenges like the bounty hunters, right? That only come to get the money and then don't leave, but come to all the hackathons. How do you also keep them engaged to build something longer? So one idea was approaching it more like an accelerator. Aaron, do you have other ideas on this? Like how to keep people engaged when they came through the funnel of a hackathon or similar?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of it. But for me, there's kind of, for any successful technology project or like engineering team, you need three things. You need to have funding, you need to have economic support, because it's kind of hard to do your best work when you don't know how you're going to pay your rent. You need to have interest. You need to be excited about what you're building, and you need to have product market fit. I'm like a big proponent of that. I think, yes, excitement can carry you so far, but if you're constantly building stuff that nobody's using, it becomes demoralizing and you go work on something else, you lose interest. For hackathons, we kind of have, we definitely have one, we definitely have the interest. Like a lot of people are there, they're building something that they find fun or they find interesting. So that's taken care of. We have some of the funding as well. A lot of these hackathons, as Alberto mentioned, they have quite large prize pools, and there definitely is an opportunity there to also to link them up with like the Web3 Foundation or other grants programs like Decentralized Futures. So there is funding available as well. So now it's just like the product market fit. How do we get this from something that is a weekend idea that is deployed on one person's laptop to something that is out there and is usable and that other people can start to interact with? And I think we've always had a bit of a problem with that. If you're building a parachain, it's like, great, okay, we've got this thing working in a weekend. Okay, how do we launch it? Well, you wait for the next auction and you keep your fingers crossed and you go out and you do a lot of fundraising and try to make sure you've got enough DOT to win the auction. It's like, that kind of puts a bit of a dampener on the enthusiasm that somebody may have, or the acceleration that they might be under. And I think the way in which we're moving now, with Agile Core Time and eventually with Jam, etc., is really going to help with this, to allow people to to deploy in a weekend, not just build in a weekend. But I think alongside that, there's also going to have to be the BD element to it. We're going to have some kind of business development. You're going to have a marketing plan. You're going to have some way of like reaching an audience, and that's where like companies like Distractive come in, etc. It really needs to be a full ecosystem play to get these projects from something that is a weekend idea at a hackathon to something that is ready for consumer facing.
Great, thank you. A lot of parts, and important that it really needs to be the collective effort of the ecosystem, which is, of course, a bit of a challenge with more decentralization, because the teams are still building, the new processes are being built, and now we have not one DevRel team communicating with one BD team. We have 5 teams communicating with another 5 teams. But we also have better expertise, right? You guys are focusing on one specific part on DevRel. So I think it also makes things more efficient with a specific focus on how to improve DevRel and onboarding. Maybe one question also on what we just discussed, because it plays also into the connection between DevRel and business development. What are some of the ideas you would like to see and you're pushing for to be built on Polkadot, especially now with Core Time being ready, which makes it much easier to deploy ideas on Polkadot, but also with the approach, the Polkadot is actually kind of pushed and marketed as like an enterprise-ready chain, right? Where we want to have big deals. We just onboarded mythical games and so on. How does it fit with like an idea of an individual developer that just has a cool thing to hack on? So what are some of the ideas that you want to see that really enhances also the ecosystem from a maybe more individual developer perspective? Aaron, or...
Sure, I can take this. For me, and thankfully, this is something that I see being worked on now, is I still think that the onboarding experience for the end user is abysmal. And that's not just like in Polkadot, that's in blockchain and Web3 in general. You know, the idea that you need like manage your seed phrases, and you know, you need to know about wallets, and you need to know about like you know, ledger, and you need to know about a hot wallet versus a cold wallet versus a, for your average consumer, they don't care. Let's be honest, they really don't care. And for a majority of apps that they're going to be interacting with, probably don't need to care either. You know, yes, okay, if you are in charge of somebody's entire life savings, then yeah, they need to care and you need to care. You know, but if you are creating a little game, or you're creating, you know, a kind of app that shouldn't really interact with like any large amount of token, why do they need to worry about wallets? You know, and we're seeing that now where people are going, okay, well, let's make it an invisible process. You know, let's use logins like people are used to, and we can create a wallet invisibly for them in the background, and we'll manage that. Okay, yes, you know, not your keys, not your crypto. We all know this, but for the vast majority of these things, it's not going to matter at that stage. And at some point, if somebody wants to like, okay, I'm going to move off this game and go to a different game, and I want to bring all of my items with me, it's like, okay, well, now we can transfer those items to a wallet that you control, and you can take them along with you. But that shouldn't be the first step. You shouldn't have to worry about a wallet at the first step. You know, you want to go and you want to access the application, you want to play the game, you want to whatever. And then at some point later on, if you want to export those items and take them, take self-custody, you can. And I've seen a lot of like kind of software as a service companies like spinning up to do this kind of thing. And I think that's going to be one of the big boons for our industry, you know, because at the moment, yes, it's difficult to get developers, but developers are not going to come to an ecosystem where there's not users, and it's difficult to get users because users can't use the ecosystem. It's chicken and egg kind of thing. And I think if we can bring some more, you know, not super technical users in and increase the number of people that's in the ecosystem in general, then that's also going to raise the number of developers that we have as well.
No, I agree. I just jumping here. I think, you know, Polkadot technology is very modular, right? I mean, you can create like app chains, rollups, and parachains that are very, very unique and powerful, right? Compared to like other smart contract platforms in which you have to sort of adapt and sort of create solutions around smart contracts that you have to adapt to the tech stack that they provide, right? And so I would definitely like to see sort of a push on like, how do you actually use that customizability, right, to create better user experience overall. I think that's something that it's been, you know, a hot narrative in other ecosystems, like, you know, Coinbase is smart contract wallet and account abstraction and all of that. All right, how do we do that in Polkadot? But times 10 in terms of like how good it is, right? Because we have that power of doing these things at a core runtime level, not, like I said, a solution built on top of solutions that are sort of should be less straightforward, right? And so I think other ecosystems are ahead of us because they're pushing as well those boundaries on how do they do this. I mean, even myself, the other day I was working with Ledger and like the Ledger in Asset Hub, and I was like, oh my God, you know, we have to do such a better job in terms of user experience, right? And so even the current solutions that exist out there, you know, thinking about how end users that are not familiar with the ecosystem actually interact with the ecosystem itself. It's a crucial component.
So just to add my tidbit here. So from my personal, the reason I got into Polkadot, the reason I like Polkadot, because I see it as the purest form of writing software, right? But I think a lot of people are not like me, right? Like a lot of people are like, okay, why should I build there? There needs to be some economic incentive, right? Like there needs to, but for me, it's the purest form of writing software, right? Permissionless software that can talk with other software permissionlessly. That's why I like Polkadot, right? That's why I went to Polkadot versus other places. As far as like products or ideas that could be built on Polkadot, I 100% agree with like what Aaron was saying about the onboarding experience has to be solved. I think there's other ecosystems that are doing a slightly better job of doing that. We could build those abstractions within Polkadot. I think we need more focus on that. Like the other thing is like people need reasons to build permissionless software, right? And Why do I need to build my entire tech stack permissionlessly, right? What aspects of my Web3 tech stack should be permissionless, right? I have some friends that are building Web3 solutions, and the reason that they find that Web3 works for them is because it's more efficient. Like in terms of like transferring assets, for example, you're removing middleman, right? Middle people, right? So it solves that problem. But I think that we're still super early on in terms of Polkadot. The tech is so advanced that the world has to like catch up a little bit so that there's more reasons to write permissionless software. Right now, there isn't enough reason. Like right now, we have an NFT 2.0 features in the palette NFTs, right? That's been there for a year now. There's features in there that other ecosystems don't have. Nobody's used it so far. Like some of the features, some we've used, but it's live on Asset Hub, and some of the features I haven't seen people use it yet.
So this would be a challenge that you're solving with POP to make it easier to use, because sometimes it's also the question of how is it market, right? The product marketing, what kind of wording are we using? Just as an example, why do you think it is like this, and what can be done better?
It's already being done better. So like that's one thing. Like I think that if we take a helicopter view of all of this, right? Like a year ago, Parity decentralized quite a bit of its company, so that it's not the center of things. Parity recognized developer experience. They recognize the need for stability, so they're already doing that with their releases. They've changed things significantly. A lot of teams got decentralized, and we're learning, how to kind of like work with each other. So like I see a lot of positivity. I see a lot of things happening right now in the ecosystem. OpenGov is a huge success. Yeah, we need to iterate on it. Okay. But it's pretty cool with what's happening on chain, right? So I think it's all on its way. A lot of people in the ecosystem now understand our pain points and are trying to solve it. So yeah, definitely bullish here.
Amazing. And to maybe also learn from the journey that sometimes to make things a bit simpler, or also not, I mean, it's not about reinventing the wheel, but also maybe simpler as like product marketing, to reuse existing wording from like Web3, right? Instead of coming up with a new wording, although the tech is more innovative. Maybe that's something we have all learned this, and I think in DevRel specifically as well for Polkadot in the onboarding journey. But maybe one more question to look ahead, right? There again, a lot of changes coming on Polkadot. Just launched Core Time. Now we're talking already about Jam, which is a bit more far out. But maybe Alberto, if you want to summarize a little bit on what Jam will do and how it can also affect like the developer journey and onboarding journey. Keep it with this question first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to talk a lot about Jam because I've been a longish time. There's people that have been in this space for longer than me, but like in my experience, you got to focus on like the 6 to maybe 12 months ahead of you. I think Jam is still sort of being conceptualized. A lot of things are being worked on, and sort of like we'll get to Jam when it's further close to us, but I think there's so much uncertainty on a lot of things. Like the general idea is understood, right? But like people are still working on the client side, people are still working on the runtime side, and so for us, it's more sort of like how we deal with the issues today, that with the issues that are come up when Jan. Actually, we're like dealing with Core Time right now, and like then we have to deal with elastic scaling, right? And so I think Jam conceptually it's clear what it's trying to solve. But like from a DevRel perspective, it's something that I think more marketing can use than DevRel, because it's like they're selling that idea, right? And so for us, like I said, it's more about focusing on the things that are upcoming. And like Aaron mentioned before, like Parity is now working on the stability, and we're actually really, really attaching to that idea, because that will help and ease our work as well. But yeah, I'm not trying to avoid the Jam question. It's just that I've been asked this before, and I think it's like kind of nonsense to talk about it, because it's we're working on it today, and today is still filled with like uncertainties. So, yeah.
This is a valid answer. And Rashid asked this question here, so I think it's definitely important to answer on this and keep focus, right? Keep focus on to solve the problems we have ahead at the moment, and then we can talk about the future challenges. Maybe someone else asked here, Wayne, he loves the regular shows. Thank you. I hope they're always educational. And then, do you agree that education is important and it's something that we could improve? I mean, we touched on the education part, but maybe if someone wants to repeat or add to this answer, to this question as well.
Yeah, I can definitely jump in that one. That's our entire business is focused around improving developer education for the ecosystem. Yeah, I think developer education is vitally important, and not just in like the actual guides themselves and allowing people to go through and build something, but in the process of creating the guide too. Like, yes, I am a developer educator. That's what I do. I spend a lot of my time building and then writing about what I built. But in order to build something, I have to go through the same process as any other developer would to build it. You know, I'm using the same resources. You know, I'm using the same documentation. I'm using the same SDKs. You know, I don't have any super secret insider SDK that doesn't have any bugs. You know, like that doesn't exist. Like, I'm using the exact same technologies as everybody else, and I am facing the exact same problems and the exact same frustrations. You know, as much as I'm a developer educator, I actually see my job as being professionally frustrated. Like, that is my job, is to be as frustrated as possible, because the more frustrated I am, the more pain points that I discover, the more ways I find to solve those, then the less frustrated the developer after me has to be. You know, if I can find those pain points, if I can document them, if I can explain, you know, why something has to be done a way that has to be, and that means that somebody else doesn't have to sit and spend 4 days figuring it out themselves, great. You know, I have succeeded in that part of the education. Or, and Bruno can attest to this, if I do find kind of rough edges in tools and things I'm using, then part of what I do as well is going in and you know, documenting those, creating issues, creating tickets, you know, reporting them back to the teams working on it. I'm incredibly excited for Alberto's start working on the individual documentation for the likes of chopsticks, etc., because that doesn't exist right now. And I'm you know, while it's not within our remit, we're a very small team to be writing that amount of documentation, I'm looking forward to being able to contribute to it. You know, going, okay, well, this section here, whenever I tried it, it wasn't exactly clear that output should have been this. So here's a pull request that I feel makes this, clarifies what you should expect back. You know, that kind of level of contribution to these things. And that process of going through the same development as any other engineer after me, I think is almost as important as the output, you know, because it helps shape what we're going to write, but it also helps improve the documentation, the tooling that even that we're not writing, that's being created by other teams.
Bruno, would you like to add something?
Education is a core pillar of Rogue and Pop. So I see as critical, like looking at my experience, I was very lucky to learn from core engineers at Parity. So it's my responsibility working in the ecosystem to share that knowledge. And I think that anyone who's attended PBA and has been given a DF grant or is working in the ecosystem, it's also their responsibility, education. It's the only way we're going to move forward, right? So that's one thing. The other one is the jam question. Like Alberto said, you know, it's a little bit far off now, right? Right now, like what do we have, right? We made a ton of progress with the relay chain, with the parachain. We have teams that are mature now. We have Inc programming language v5 that's mature right now. So from our standpoint, at Pop, we're building an end-to-end solution to build products on Polkadot, right? So we need these people who want to build real businesses on Polkadot. They need a stable foundation, and we have that now, right? So that's where our focus is right now. But like Alberto said, like as the things start coming out with Jam, we're definitely going to have our finger on it.
All right. Yes, I think that summarizes or brings us again back to the focus to overcome the main challenges. And I just also want to quote an attendee here. Gideon says very beautifully, like learning and understanding Polkadot and the ecosystem might be a challenge or difficult, but once you start and knowing how it works, you realize how beautiful and powerful the technology is. Thank you for sharing this, Gideon. And I think this is really the part of what your motivation is, right? To really make things more easier to understand so people can easily understand what can be built on Polkadot. So I think this concludes also the whole conversation. We are at the full hour today. We really touched on like how DevRel works within Polkadot, what you guys are really focusing on, the core pillars, but in a decentralized way. But are there any other motivational ideas or inputs that you would like to give the developers out there to join the Polkadot ecosystem? I start with you, Alberto.
Yeah, no, I would say sort of it's difficult because I mean that's one of the issues we're trying to solve, right? Like how do you get sort of all the information from the Polkadot ecosystem? I think just the regular things, to be honest, just to try to stay in the loop. I think Bruno mentioned a really important resource, which is the Stack Overflow forum, also the forum from Polkadot as well itself. I think that's a good resource as well. My personal sort of but this is outside of Polkadot, to be honest, but my personal sort of source of sort of developer-related information that helps my developer relations path or journey. It's the Electric Capital report that really gives you a lot of insights on how developer activities moving around the Web3 ecosystem, which is super helpful. Because I come from the Moonbeam ecosystem, we also focus a lot on the Solidity developer survey results. That also tells you sort of how is the Ethereum ecosystem itself moving, in terms of technology. And like I said, we have to invite those developers as well into the Polkadot ecosystem to come and deploy. AssetHub is going to provide Ethereum compatibility as well. So we might as well also understand what tools they're using and what they're looking for. So I'll keep it brief with those things. And I think we'll be sharing links as well to those. So.
Thank you. Great resources that you mentioned. Yeah, Aaron, motivational words for the developers to join Polkadot?
Yeah, I guess best thing I can say to anybody who's thinking about joining in Polkadot is it is so much better now than it was 2 years ago. I know whenever I go out and speak to people at conferences, I speak to people at hackathons online, etc. There is these preconceptions about Polkadot that it is incredible tech and incredibly difficult. That the complexity matches the pace in which of the innovation. And while that has been true, as Alberto and I've talked about a couple of times, we're now seeing things like release cycles. We're seeing a much stronger focus on documentation. We're seeing a much stronger focus on continued support, BD, etc. Like this is an exciting time. If you're thinking about joining Polkadot to become a developer, a lot of I'm not saying there's no rough edges. There's still a lot of rough edges. There's still a lot of things to be documented. There's still a lot of educational content needs to be produced, but it is moving in the right direction and moving quickly. We're now getting out of the sprinting developing stage and now into where I think it is a more mature product that's kind of ready for people to start building on. So that's kind of what's exciting about being an ecosystem. Other things that Alberto was mentioning around kind of resources for developer relations in general. I'm a big proponent of the ARP. It's a framework for doing developer relations that we're kind of mimicking a little bit in the way we've done this decentralizations. There's a lot of different parts to it. It stands for, I'm gonna try awareness, acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue, product. I mean, you think of things like awareness acquisition, that's your distractive, like your retention, that's going to be, or your activation is going to be pop, your retention is going to be Paper Moon and Accelerate Polkadot. Like we are kind of covering all of these verticals in these different teams, and it's kind of interesting to see how they map to each other. So yeah, that's for anybody who's interested in getting into developer relations and not quite sure where to start. That's a framework has helped me a lot in the past.
Thank you also for sharing these resources. And last word to you, over, Bruno.
So 3 words: feedback, feedback, feedback. So we need feedback because we're building POP for you guys, right? So we need to know what works, what doesn't work. We're iterating, right? The other thing that I want to say is that I think it's a misnomer to say that Polkadot is hard. Okay, so Polkadot can be hard, but it doesn't have to be hard. So definitely also in terms of feedback, just be loud and clear. Ask questions. How do I spin up a parachain? How do I do X, Y, and Z, right? Ideally put it online in a community website where others who have similar questions can see the solution and the answer to that. Because if we're loud, like, hey guys, how do I do this, right? Then somebody will answer it and it's done, right? Check that off, right? And so we start moving forward.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I totally agree on like adjusting also the messaging, right? And not confusing people with actually the wrong messaging, because we can do, it is not as complex as it was or as people perceive. So this is very good to clarify. Yes, Alberto needs to jump off. He has another meeting already. Bye. We are wrapping it up here as well. Thank you everyone for joining. We all hope you learned something about developer relations onboarding. Please check out Papermoon, play on Polkadot, and accelerate Polkadot for educational content, developer experience. And I hope we can see you all in the next month for our next session of Decentralized Mic. Thank you.